very exciting day. The next morning, July 14th, I picked up the rental car and we drove to the Apollo 11 News Center in Cape Canaveral. On the second floor, there were large, long tables loaded with NASA flight plans, press kits, and other brochures. And there were also stacks of contractor material, too, about their roles in Apollo 11. I picked up a NASA flight plan, which I still have, and which Buzz Aldrin autographed later, as well as many other goodies as I could carry. We also took a 4-hour exclusive mini bus tour of the Cape, just for journalists. It started in an exhibit area, and where we saw Mercury Atlas rocket and a Mercury Redstone rocket. We went along and made many stops, and one of these was Pad 34, where the Apollo 1 crew had perished. We then went to a viewing area just 3/4 of a mile from the Apollo 11 Saturn V. This was as close as non-NASA or contractor people could get. You can see here that at this point, at T-minus 2 days, that the Saturn V rocket is attached to the red launch umbilical tower and is surrounded by the gray mobile service structure, or gantry. And it's all on top of a mobile launch platform, which was wheeled up onto the top of the pad. We then went to the base of the wire escape system, designed to remove the astronauts from the top of the rocket in case of emergency. They would jump into a gondola, and the gondola would go down these wires to this area away from the pad, where they were to jump into armored personnel carriers. Thankfully, this never needed to be used. In the afternoon, I attended a NASA Center's briefing in which the directors of NASA involved in manned spaceflight were present. You may have heard of some of these people. This is Werner von Braun, who is head of the Marshall Space Flight Center. This is Kurt Debus, who is the head of KSC. This is Robert Gilruth, who was head of the Manned Spacecraft Center, later to become the Johnson Space Center. This was the head of Goddard at the same. And this last guy here is a guy you may have heard of who passed away recently. That's Jack King, who was the public affairs officer at that time. Now, these men, along with Sam Phillips and along with George Lowe, were the men I think who were most responsible for the success of the Apollo program. And it was really thrilling to me to attend this Center Director's briefing. This was a press conference where von Braun was asked the significance of the flight, and he compared it to when aquatic animals first went from the ocean to the land. Now that evening, I went back to the press center, and the Apollo 11 crew, which was in isolation, was remotely interviewed by a panel of newsmen, including Walter Cronkite. I was in the audience for that, and we could see the astronauts on these TV monitors. So here's Neil Armstrong as we were able to see it from the Apollo 11 News Center. The incredible day ended by taking a NASA bus to view the Apollo 11 Saturn V at dusk and at night. The xenon lights were turned on, and the rocket sparkled really like a jewel in the night was the best analogy. But this was one of the most amazing and spectacular sights of the trip to see this. The next day, July 15th, was the day before the scheduled launch. We took a more detailed tour of the VAB. I saw the 3 stages of the Saturn V designated for Apollo 13 on the floor of the VAB, ready for stacking. We took an elevator up to the top of the VAB and looked down at the massive structure. But the most exciting opportunity was to get right up to the base of the Saturn V, already stacked for the next Apollo flight, Apollo 12. I could see 2 technicians working at the base of the rocket. I could see 2 of the Mammoth F1 engines, and I could see one of the swing arms that kept the rocket on the pad until it was ready to be released and lift off. Our tour also took us to the Launch Control Center. This is a picture, a little bit blurred, of the Apollo 11 launch controllers actually at work the day before the launch. And we were taken to another firing room. There were 3 firing rooms. We were taken to the 3rd firing room and could actually get down and close to all the panels and everything. And this is the flight director's console at the other firing room, who was in charge of all the launch operations. In the afternoon, we took another NASA bus, and we went to a vantage point where we could see the mobile service structure, the gantry, being pulled away from the Saturn V rocket. They had roadblocks there and policemen. After it was pulled away, we went to another vantage point where we could see the Saturn V rocket up close and personal. The Saturn V rocket was 363 feet high from the base here all the way to the top. And you'll notice the liquid oxygen tank. And I think you can understand why it said no smoking. After we saw the rollback, I had made an appointment to have a one-on-one interview with Dr. George Miller, who is the Associate Administrator at NASA for the Office of Manned Spaceflight. We first thought it was at the press center, but then found out that he was at the hotel, so we rushed to talk to him. I had a 20-minute conversation with Dr. Miller in which he outlined a really visionary future space program. He envisioned having 2 space stations, one around the Earth and one around the Moon. He envisioned having one shuttlecraft to go between the Earth and the Earth space station, a second shuttle to go between the Earth station and the lunar orbit station, and then a 3rd craft to actually land on the Moon. Unfortunately, as you all know, the space shuttle to Earth orbit has been abandoned, and of that grand plan, only the Earth orbiting space station exists right now. So later that night, I phoned in a story to the Daily about launch preparations. Again, this was in the old days where I would write out something on a typewriter and actually get on a telephone and dictate the story to the editors back in Ann Arbor. So the next day was July 16, 1969. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning, and Marv and I got dressed and drove to the NASA Press Center. There we boarded a NASA bus to go to the Manned Spaceflight Operations Building at KSC, or MSOB. This building is still there, but it's now known as the Neil Armstrong Operations and Checkout Building, or ONC. We rushed out of the bus to grab the best location in a roped-off area designated for journalists. It was kind of like a rugby scrum. Elbows were flying, we were running. We wanted to get the best position to see the astronauts. We got a pretty decent place about 3 rows behind the rope. Deke Slayton walked out at about 6:10 a.m. for a television interview. Deke was the director of flight crew operations then. We couldn't hear what he said. I checked my camera and my exposures. The anticipation really started to build. At about 6:25 a.m., we could see through the door of the MSOB people scurrying around. A white dot could be seen coming down the hallway. The dot turned into a spacesuit, clearly seemed to be Neil Armstrong, as he exited the door and started to walk down the ramp. He was followed by Mike Collins and Buzz Aldrin, and then by 2 suit techs. This is Joe Schmidt, who suited up Alan Shepard in the first American space flight, and Joe Schmidt is still alive today at age 100. And this guy here, this young guy here, is Ron Woods. Ron Woods went on to work for NASA for over 40 years, became a space artist, and Ron is present at the meeting today, and has